There are places on this earth that call to the soul. Rugged landscapes carved by time, windswept deserts whispering ancient secrets, mountains where prophets once stood, and rivers that carried history itself. These are not just locations on a map. They are the very fabric of the story God has been telling from the beginning. But how do we truly see them? How do we step beyond the words on the page and experience the land as it was meant to be understood? This week on Undaunted Pursuit, we embark on a journey few will ever take, guided by a man who has spent decades walking the paths of prophets, standing where kings once ruled, and listening to the echoes of Scripture in the landscapes of the Holy Land. A man of adventure, a scholar of the Word, and a storyteller shaped by the very geography of the Bible. Dr. John A. Beck, known to some as Jack, is not just an author and a geographer. He's an explorer of the soul of Scripture. He has braved the wilderness, scaled mountains, and even built his own airplane just to chase the thrill of discovery. And yet, his greatest adventure has been unlocking the biblical world through the lens of the land itself. In his latest work, he takes us deep into Israel, into the heart of the places that shaped the people of God. And today, he's here to take us with him. So strap in, open your mind, and prepare to see the Bible like never before. Okay, hey guys, welcome back to Undaunted Pursuit Podcast. We, as promised, have a special guest today, and I want to welcome Dr. Jack Beck, or also known as John A. Beck, correct?
Yeah, so it seems right out of the gate, we get all sorts of crazy confusion, right? So
Yeah.
if you're collecting taxes from me, it's John A. Beck. If you're looking for a book of mine, it's John A. Beck, but I'm Jack, so nice to see you.
Man, I was so excited to have you on, especially, I don't know, I call her a publicist. She's a PR gal. Anyway, I get messages from her that set us up with she set us up with some amazing guests, and this woman you're working with, she is amazing. She works with some really neat
Wonderful
people like you, and so I was so excited about this one that I made a special intro for this, and it's real cinematic. I think it fits what we're going to be talking about in this week's episode. And so I made a very special intro for just this episode this week.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
No, we're glad to have you on here. And man, I'm anxious to get into where you've been, what you're doing, and where are you currently? We were just talking about where we're from. I've droned on and on this podcast about our upcoming move. So where are you located at? You're from the U.S., right?
Exactly so. Yes, exactly so. And I base out of southern Wisconsin, so the greater Milwaukee area is where I'm at. And that's where my desk and my books are, and the computer for writing. But I find myself dashing around all over the place to teach and to do media production. So it's hard to know sometimes what to call home. But Germantown, Wisconsin, as much home as anything
Hold on
else.
a second. I have got to stop you right there. Yeah. I have a grandma. I was born in Wisconsin, so I have a grandma that lives in Colgate.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just right down the road.
I got it, Aaron. That's cool. Yeah, it is. It is. It is. That's about how long it takes to find a Wisconsin connection. I'll be walking around Israel and somebody will bump into me and they'll be like, about 4 or 5 sentences in, we get to Wisconsin.
Yep.
So
that's funny.
Yep. It's pretty awesome. I saw Marshall smiling. He's like, oh, I know he's going to hit on that. Well, that's awesome. We had, oh man, I got so many questions, and I'm trying to think about the order of how I wanted to talk about it. What, you're from Wisconsin. What got you so into, and it's like, I was just thinking as you were talking, Jack, that you're like a Christian Who is that? Who's that guy we watch all the time on Expedition Unknown? I was thinking that as I've watched through your seasons on YouTube, and we'll get into that a little bit
Mhm.
later. Josh Gates, you're like a biblical Josh Gates.
Oh, yeah,
Is what
yeah, gotcha.
what got you
Gotcha.
started? What got you
Yeah,
started and interested in biblical
yeah.
geography?
Yeah, so I think probably the best place to start, Aaron, and just to let you know that I'm an outdoor guy, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
as a kid, I spent a lot of the time on my grandparents' farm in Lebanon, which turned me into an outdoor world guy. My parents loved to be out in the Mountain West, camping
Mm-hmm.
and hiking. And so I just sort of have a lifestyle of snowshoeing and backpacking and
Wow.
very outdoor oriented person, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
always say that a bad day outdoors is better than a good day indoors for me. So
Yeah.
so uh, that life kind of lived in isolation from my Bible student, Bible scholar life for a very long time. But when I was in graduate school, the Lord sort of arranged my life in a way that put me in the same relationship, or
Mm-hmm.
in an advising relationship with Barry Beitzel, who is the one of the best known of the biblical geographers, really in the world,
Mm-hmm.
author of the Moody Bible Atlas. And he said to
Okay.
me, Jack, you got to come and take my course in Bible geography because you're this outdoor guy. You're a language student. You spend a lot of time in the languages, but there's something here for you because of who you are.
Yeah.
So I signed up, and I would say about 35 minutes into that class, my professional life changed
Wow.
because we were talking about Matthew 4:13. Jesus left Nazareth and went and lived in Capernaum.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a text that linguistically is a pretty simple sentence. But we unpacked that text for an hour, comparing what Nazareth is like, what Capernaum is like, and how this changed the dynamic of Jesus' ministry. And I realized that although I'd been reading the Bible my whole life, um, I was missing a really important dimension of how the Bible had chosen to communicate. Not
Mm-hmm.
terribly surprising if we analyze our own speech patterns and we realize how often we assume geographical understanding or even upload geography as part of the way we communicate, right? We were talking
Mm-hmm.
about where we're from. How long did
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
take before we
Yeah.
got geography into the conversation? So it's not terribly surprising then that when the Bible tells the story of people who are like us, place bound, place connected people, it's not
Yeah.
terribly surprising that geography is going to be part of how their story is communicated and how the biblical authors and poets choose to influence us through their communication.
Yeah.
And, in summary, that just for the next 30 years of my life has been invested in trying to understand the place that we have these stories originate so that I might better
Mm.
understand those stories.
That makes me think of a question. Is what so you've been there. You've had your boots on the ground there. When they make this comment that's like, "Oh, Jesus from Nazareth, nothing good comes out of Nazareth." What geographically would make them want to make that comment? Is there something about where he was
Yeah,
from?
Yeah, so first of all, Nathaniel makes the comment, who's comes from Cana, just on the road from Nazareth.
Hmm.
So this is a Galilean making a comment about another Galilean. So the
Right.
question is, what in the world is there about Nazareth that even the people up north
Hmm.
tended to think less well of it? And I think the first observation I would make is that it's so small and isolated that it seemed just like rural, simple folk. It's not the place that is mentioned in the Old Testament. It's not mentioned in any of the Jewish traditional writings. Speaking of Nazareth.
Right. Right.
It is an off the grid place. No one famous comes from this place until we see Jesus and his family
Yeah.
coming from there. So
Hmm.
it's just a place where expectations crater. Now Cana where Nathaniel's from is bigger. It's out on one of the secondary roads that connects the coast with the interior. So he's got a place. He comes from a place that's got a bit more game. And when he hears that this stellar figure that everybody's been waiting for centuries, for millennia, is from Nazareth, it's just unthinkable that you would have a figure of Jesus' stature coming from a place like that.
Man,
Yeah,
this just,
and this becomes this becomes a bit of an obstacle for Jesus. We talk about Jesus of Nazareth in a very positive, uplifting way, but that's a label that created low expectations, and needed to be overcome. And it's an interesting thing to watch as people interact with him from Galilee in the north. But then watch what happens when he goes south into Judea, because Judeans tended to look at people from Galilee as rural, generally as rural, unsophisticated, spiritually suspect. And so when Jesus talked to Judeans, he had an even bigger obstacle to overcome. He's a Galilean and a Galilean from Nazareth.
That's really cool to hear you explain this from your point of view, because you've been there. You've had, like Aaron said, boots on the ground, and you're able to really bring this to life with your experience and having been there and walked around and seen everywhere he's been and walked in the same places. It puts a whole new perspective on all this, which is really cool. Just sitting here listening to you, it makes me want to jump on a plane and head over there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and Marshall, you know what I say? I say I've spent so much time there that part of me is from there.
Yeah.
and so it's just when I hear the stories and I know where those stories are occurring, there's just a lot of things that crop into my thought process that lies behind the language of our texts.
Yeah.
And this is what I feel is so powerful. It's not just when a place is mentioned in a text, but just knowing where a story is evolving begins to shape how I think about what I'm going to expect to hear and how the interaction may go.
Does it help you understand the Bible better, having actually been there and walked in some of the places he's walked?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. It makes a huge difference. And again, let me approach this from the perspective that as a scholar, I began my inquiry into text, professional inquiry into text, through the category or through the portal of language, grammar and vocabulary choices,
Gotcha,
and literary analysis. I think those are incredibly vital ways of unpacking what a text is saying and what it means.
Yeah.
But there's something missing there's a missing ingredient if I don't also bring in, alongside the communication event, what's going on in the real estate. And, just these things sort of open up like a flower when you begin to see those stories in those places.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I love it.
My wife and I have been talking about this for a very long time, wanting to go to Israel and to take our kids there and see it and just, explain to, just let them be able to experience that physical place of what we read in God's word, about it. That way, it's just, and then even just watching your seasons on YouTube. And like I said, we'll get towards the end we'll plug all that at the end, but just watching your docuseries on there, I looked over at my wife the other night. I was like, hey, it's like, if there's one other place that I would want to live, that would be Israel.
Yeah. Well, and I'll piggyback on that because neither of you have had a chance to be there yet, right?
No, not yet.
Is that correct?
Not yet.
Yeah. So let me give you a perspective that you get within a day walking around or traveling around this place. And that is, a lot of people go to the Holy Land, they go to Israel with the intention of learning about a place, right? The assumption is it'll have one geographic, one presentation, one kind of weather system, one kind of culture.
Yeah.
And the reality is there's about 15 different subregions, ecological regions. And when you move from one to the other, which can take as little as 10 to 15 miles, you'll find yourself with different geology, different topography, different weather systems that impact it. You'll find the human response to that place being different in the ancient world than it is 10, 15 miles away. And so you end up with a completely unique story that tends to configure to one of these subregions. So rather than just learning one geography, you need to learn 15 geographies of the land in order to better understand how stories fit in place. And as I say, you can't take a story that is evolving in one region, move it to another region, and have the same story. It just wouldn't work. It's like pushing a round peg into a square hole. There are things that are unique enough about stories that they belong in places.
Well, take that for example, like
I'm so intrigued.
you take your season 1 where you were talking about Jerusalem having this tactical advantage, being up on a ridge or on the hill, and then you look at and you get to season 4, and you're talking about Samaria and how we see Samaria kind of gets a bad rap in some of the stories that we read, but yet it's so fertile and it's such a beautiful landscape of a place. And just like, man, there's so much more to there, and how it was actually. I think what were you saying in that in this season 4, that it's it was actually first established. It was there before Jerusalem was actually the capital city, I believe, is what you were saying. Am I correct?
Right. Yeah. So the first two worship centers of ancient Israel that we meet in the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, are in Samaria. The first at Shechem, the second at Shiloh or Shiloh. And so long before, centuries before, there was a worship center that was in Jerusalem. We have the promises of God circulating in that land around sanctuaries that are in Samaria. That's where the longest memory is of the promises of God in the land.
That's amazing.
Sitting here listening to all this and knowing about your YouTube. Now I'm going to start watching this. I haven't started watching it yet. Aaron was telling me how he's been watching it, but just hearing it coming out of your mouth and Aaron's, I'm like, man, I'm not, because there's a handful of people that I follow on YouTube and watching stuff, but this has got me really intrigued just sitting here listening to this. And after hearing you talk and just I don't know, you have a whole different perspective on the Bible, and it just really kind of, me, a guy who doesn't like to read, I'm more of I like to watch videos and learn that way. You've got me on the edge of my seat.
Well, let me push you over the edge, Marshall. Let me give you an example, because we've got examples where the place, physical nature of the place changes the story. The move from Nazareth to Capernaum is a move into completely different environments, topographically, completely different ecosystems, completely different economies. But the one that I always find compelling is Jesus going to the village of Nain, Nain, and raising a young man from the dead. And that story, it's told in a fairly brief fashion, right? Jesus leaves his hometown or adopted hometown of Capernaum, goes south to Nain, about a full day's walk. And when he arrives, there's a young man who is deceased being carried out, and mom is with him. She's a widow. And Jesus turns to the young man and says, "Young man, I say to you, get up." And he does. And if the story were to end there, it'd be an incredible story, but it would look like maybe a story that had happened in Capernaum in the north, where Jesus had raised a young girl from the dead.
Right.
But the power of the geography follows, because the way the people of Nain respond is this: a great prophet has risen among us. God has come to save his people. Now, let me build a connection to place. If you go about 2.5 miles to the south of Nain on exactly the same mountain. So there's a mountain, and on its north side you have Nain. On its south side you have a place called Shunem, just about 2.5 miles apart.
Mm-hmm.
And at Shunem, the Old Testament prophet Elisha raised a young man from the dead and gave him back to his mother.
Oh, wow.
So Jesus goes to the same piece of rising terrain, does essentially the same miracle. The people tie the two stories together geographically in a way that we might not, because we're flattening it out and we're saying all these places are the same. They're putting these two stories together. They see Jesus as a prophet. And if you know just a little bit of Hebrew, this will even make more sense. God has come to save his people, uses the word Elisha. God has come to Elisha, his people. And so you have a Jesus, apparently, and this is not the only time we see him doing this, it's just a wonderful example of it, going to a place, doing something specific, going to a place, saying something specific, in order to leverage what had happened there before, to connect himself to an Old Testament event, to an Old Testament person, to an Old Testament promise. And just by going to that place, he's building this bridge between the anticipation and arrival of the Messiah. And I love to see that happen, because we just don't necessarily see how place becomes an organizing principle. And it brings stories together that otherwise are pretty far apart in our Bible.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. It really is.
That is crazy. And so, and I was, just before coming on here, I was talking to Marshall. Well, because we were just before that story, we were on this Samaria kick, and not that this is near Samaria, but of course I don't know. I haven't been there. So, where in relation to that, to Samaria, would be like the Jezreel Valley? And I was telling Marshall about just watching this new documentary on the Mosaic Church that they finally came out with on Angel Studios.
Megiddo.
And the Megiddo, yeah.
Sure.
And it's interesting. But what they don't talk about really is the geography. I mean, what's the significance of this place of worship being found where it was found in Megiddo, and in relation to some of these other geographical features or places?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a Byzantine church. So it's after the New Testament era, probably third, fourth century. I don't remember the dates exactly, but
Third,
somewhere
I think,
in that area, AD. So we're talking about after the New Testament era, but it's locating in a place that is a high transportation environment. The Jezreel Valley, and Megiddo's on the west side of the Jezreel Valley, is the easiest place to go through the central mountain zone on an east-west course. So if you go to the south or north of the Jezreel Valley, you end up having to climb and descend repeatedly to go east and west. The Jezreel Valley is a flat walk. So the international highway that bridges 3 continents is going to go through there. This church then is built on the major international connecting artery that moves through. So that's interesting to me. You're building a church that has high access to travelers. The other thing that's interesting is that we have a Roman camp that is contemporaneous. It's operating at the same time as this church, which has suggested to some that perhaps there were Roman soldiers who had come to know Jesus, believe in Jesus, and that they were part of the community that worshiped there. So the geography and the proximity of those things may have an interesting story to tell.
Right. I didn't. The reason I asked that was because I didn't know if it had any significance in relation to Old Testament Samaria and this New Testament church geographically. Is kind of where I was getting at there. I didn't know where it was in relation to that.
Yeah. So the Jezreel Valley is just north of the region of Samaria, and it produces a different set of stories because it's so different than Samaria does, even though they butt right up against one another.
Okay. Yeah. It's also interesting. So how many times have you actually been over there? And you've been doing this for the past 30 years, you said, right?
Yeah, and I've lost count of how often I've been there. It's in the hundreds, right, of times. But yeah, and I always say when people ask how often I've been, I just say enough.
Enough.
I've been there enough to know. Yeah, I've seen every season and walked in most places multiple times. So it's
Would
not
you
a very big country, right? It's about the
Yeah.
size of New Jersey.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's
Okay.
a lot smaller than I even imagined.
10,000 square miles.
Oh,
Yeah,
no wonder.
10,000 square miles. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can drive north to south, I mean, when we do our programs with Jerusalem University College, the field study programs that I teach for those guys, we'll base in Jerusalem and do everything center south, and then we'll go base at the Sea of Galilee and do everything to the north.
Mm,
And so with two bases, we can easily in a couple hours drive to any of the locations we want to visit.
Oh
wow.
wow. Huh.
So are you
Interesting.
saying, I noticed that season 4 is the final, that it's kind of sad because I'm just now getting into it, but season 4 is the last and final season. What are you saying, you're not done, obviously. I mean, it holds a special place in your heart, as
Mhm.
well as it should all of us believers. Um but are you done? Are you settling back into staying in the stateside, or what?
Yeah, so actually, just the opposite. I've had to sit out a bit the last 18 months because there's been conflict in the Middle East,
Mhm.
and it's not that we couldn't get the work get to places and do the things we. I have friends that are teaching throughout the land right now. It's not a problem. It's just confidence, the North American confidence.
Yeah.
Most of the students that I teach are from North America, and just their confidence level isn't there
Mm,
yet, but it's coming back. And I
good.
plan to be back later this year for teaching trip and film production trip. So, am I done? I don't know that I'll ever be done. I'm
Good.
always learning. I
Good.
have this restless curiosity about places, and we just published the book for Our Daily Bread. I have three more books that'll be coming out in the next couple of years, so
Awesome.
those are in process. And just starting a new film production with Our Daily Bread, where we're going to focus in on the Christmas story and
Oh,
see if
cool.
we
Cool.
can unpack the larger Christmas story, the one that starts in Nazareth, goes to Bethlehem, to Jerusalem, to Egypt, and then back to Nazareth. We're going to tell that whole origin story of Jesus over against the places that host it.
Wow.
Wow. I
That'll
think
be
the closest
amazing.
I've ever been to anything like that is out in Weatherford, Texas. Well, it's Peaster, Texas. There's a ministry out there, and it's called Capernaum, and they've built this first century village out there where they do live
Yeah,
productions. And part of The Chosen was filmed out there. The first
sure,
season was filmed out there.
sure.
I used to work out there, so that's about as close as I've been to anywhere near that part of the world. So that's when I think of what you're talking about, I'm sitting here trying to relate it to that little tiny place.
Yeah, it that for anyone who loves the outdoors and is fascinated by nature,
Yeah.
Israel is
Yes.
just an incredibly diverse landscape. I think there's 2,400 different species of flowering plants
Wow.
in the land, and I do a Judean Hill Country walk with my students, and we talk about the botanic diversity just in that walk,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and you know it's just part of the Bible's communication too. The biotics are part of the Bible's communication too. It talks about plants, it talks about animals. Foxes have
Yeah.
holes, birds have nests. The Son of Man has no place
Mm-hmm.
to put his head down. Understanding the habits and the habitat of these creatures and of the plants and their idiosyncrasies is just a part that gets lifted up and put into the Bible's communication. And that's just, I'm all to say, I'm still learning. And I
Yeah.
don't know that there'll ever come a moment when I stop
Yeah.
gaining a new insight, just from the land itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow.
John
That,
Muir, um, one of my great one of my great heroes of the natural world, John Muir. I love to read his things. Had made
Yeah.
the observation that you can't run through nature; you have to walk. It's the only way you hear it talk, and
That's why
that's
he made
true.
such a long trail.
It's true. Yeah, exactly. So it's when you slow your pace to 2.5 miles an hour that you see things and hear things and smell things that otherwise just are lost to you.
Yeah.
And of all the
Yeah.
things that have changed since Bible times, uh, there are many of those things that we still experience. And that song of the bird, the Mediterranean sea breeze coming off the sea in the afternoon that cools you off. Um, these are the things that you still experience, and you feel like you're getting this sense around experience in a Bible story, then rather than just an off the page version.
Yeah. I
Well, you
absolutely
said
love
it yourself. You can feel the presence of God there the minute you step into the Holy Land, right? And I'm kind of setting this up here for to me it's a controversial topic. I don't know. I've just learned about it within the last year, and I guess it's been going on for quite some time that there are
Mhm.
people out there trying to say or prove, or I don't know how to put into words what they're trying to do, that somehow this all took place in the US, I guess, trying to make us here in the US
it.
look even better. Are you familiar with that, with what's going on, this new ideology of all of
So
these? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not sure that I'm hearing you correctly. If I am, I'm not. So what I'm
Yeah.
hearing you say is that the Bible events that we have were actually U.S. based events.
That's
Yeah,
that's
pretty much.
that is a new concept that has just recently surfaced within the past couple of years. It's preposterous. It really is. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever
Yeah.
heard, and I was anxious to have you on and kind of pick your brain on this, because there are so much extra biblical, outside of the
Yeah,
It's very
Bible,
deceiving.
archaeological evidence that supports the land of Israel, the promised land, the Holy Land, however you want to put it,
yeah,
being in that geographical location where you've been to,
yeah,
as opposed to here in the U.S. But that's kind of what we do
yeah.
here on this podcast is kind of bring up some of these other little controversial issues and kind of, no, God's word is true. It
Right.
didn't happen in the U.S.
Yeah. I don't know how I would move these events to anywhere in the U.S. and have them match the reporting. I mean,
Mhm.
there's what we know in terms of ancient Near Eastern literature, what we know in terms of archaeological inquiry. These are the sorts of things that feed in and help us understand the nature of
Mm-hmm.
the space, and they just match. They just match a story that's occurring in Israel, not
Yeah.
in North America. And in fact, I think the stories would look way different if they were North American stories than if they were
Yes.
Middle Eastern
Yeah.
stories. The
Yeah.
place names don't match. The weather doesn't match.
No.
I mean, I could go right down the road. The topography doesn't match. There's just you
Right.
end up with too many discontinuities. I thought you were going to say that people made the story up. That this was more mythic in nature. These narratives are more mythic, and
Yeah.
my response to that is, well, you got to go come and see the place,
Yeah.
because you're going
Yeah.
to open your
Exactly.
book and look at the land and say, whoa, there's just like match, 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 match. So that's another
Right.
step to say, okay, let's move it all somewhere else. I don't know of anywhere else you could even possibly move it and replicate the topography, the climate, the hydrology, all of these things, the ecosystems, the plant life, the animal life that's mentioned in the Bible. It fits
Yes.
there. It doesn't fit somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah, well, and for the record, I just
Yeah.
want to
I've been seeing that a lot,
make
Aaron,
it
too.
very clear that we do not follow that way of thinking. But it has, in for people that even closely related to my family, has been tripping them up. It's another stumbling block for some people. I don't know why, but it is, and they're
Mhm.
trying to pass it off as truth, and they make it, the videos that I've seen on it, they make it very, what's the word? Believable,
Believable and
even though it's
appealing.
not, and appealing.
Hmm.
Right. And so I wanted to debunk that with an actual PhD'd geographer that has been over there and just kind of put that to rest. And hopefully anybody listening can know that that is a complete lie.
Agreed.
So you're working on you're working on this. You're working on some film studies, and you teach students over there. What's next? You said you got 3 books coming up. You just came out with a book? Is that correct?
Yeah. So the Our Daily Bread Bible Atlas just
Okay.
released a couple of months ago. Which, if you take the film series and you go, okay, there's a lot here that you don't talk about, and I want to know more about some of these other stories that have
Right.
Geographical insights to offer. This atlas is sort of a geographic commentary. It kind of like I just did with Nain and Shunem, and said same mountainside, parallel stories. Jesus is using the place as part of it. It just takes way more stories than I've been able to handle within the framework of the film documentary.
Yeah.
And put those down for folks so that they can engage those. So that's a big project on the list. I just finished a book on heaven. She'll be out this fall.
Oh, that'd
So
be
kind of a
interesting.
strange topic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But but the publisher invited me to think about it because he said, look at what you said before, Jack, and that is a lot of what God has said to us about heaven has used the things of this earth.
Right.
And when I started doing that investigation, I realized, well, there's a lot of unpacking of our eternal home that takes place by using examples from this side of heaven. In my Father's house, Jesus said, are many rooms.
Mm-hmm.
If it weren't so, I would have told you so. Isaiah talks about a new heaven and a new earth, essentially paralleling the language of Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So what I do is I go through the Bible and I look for those connecting arteries between descriptions of heaven and the realities on the ground, and say, we can know a little bit more about heaven by unpacking the things of this earth. So that book's coming out this fall. And I've also started a workbook that is designed to teach the geography of the Holy Land without going to the Holy Land and without being around me. And so I'm trying to work myself out of a job, I guess. But what I realize is there's folk who want to would like a tool, a workbook that would give them some basic understanding of the regions of the Holy Land, the physical geography, the human geography, and then support their visual mapping with physical map work that they would do. So there's map work in the workbook, there's reinforcement exercises and Bible engagement exercises. Once you've learned about that region, let's go to the Bible and say, okay, let me walk you into some text and see what you see there now that you understand the place better. And we do that, like 15 times as we walk through the arc of the regions. So it'll be a book, I hope, that finds wide use in Christian circles. Anybody from seminary down to grade school that wants to find a way to unpack the Bible by understanding its geography. This is an autonomous learning tool, a workbook that will help you learn the land and how to bring it into your Bible reading.
Oh, wow. I like that.
So I got that book underway and is in process. And then the next book will be related to the film on Christmas, the real story of Christmas.
Yeah.
And that probably is out there a ways, 2026, probably 2027.
Not that far out.
So it's not like you're busy or anything.
Well, yeah, there's always something on my desk, right? There's always something on my desk.
That's good.
How are so when I did the intro for this, I was talking about taking like a digital journey into the Holy Land, and I want to kind of get into that a little bit with you. when you're there, what are the people like nowadays? And what is, because when I watch it on TV, and it's just like I try and I want to be there. I would love to walk through some of the marketplaces and everything. And I see you meeting up with old friends that, of course,
Sure.
obviously you've been there multiple times. And
Yeah.
what's it like? What
Yeah.
are the people like, especially like when Americans think about going someplace overseas like that? We don't know exactly what we're going to be met with, what we're going to be, what to expect,
Yeah.
really.
Well, I think the starting point is they're just like me in lots and lots and lots of ways.
Right.
So any differences that I would point to are overwhelmed by the similarities, right?
Mm-hmm.
The adventurousness of the people, a lot of the people, and part of that is not everybody's alike there, right? So there's no one American picture that I can draw of what an American is, and there's a picture of what an Israeli is, an Israeli who's a Palestinian, an Israeli who's Jewish. There's just no one
Right.
picture, but a lot of the some of my Israeli friends are just as adventurous as I am. I have often told this story because I just I sometimes adventure beyond common sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good way of saying it, but adventure pulls me into places that, the call of adventure pulls me into places maybe that are less, a more cautious person would avoid. So anyway,
Right.
there's a film producer that I've worked with in Israel, and he's a wonderful guy, and he shares a lot of my passions: outdoor
Mm-hmm.
adventure. Um, and when I filmed with him, sometimes, as a producer director, he'll look at what he wants to film and he'll go, "We need to go over there." And there's a big sign there that'll say, "Keep out." And with a smirk, he'll look at me, he'll look at me and say, "Jack, you know why they put that sign up? To keep out the weak."
Oh.
And 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 off we go into that next little bit of adventure. So I always want to start there, that there's way more similarities than differences. Now, apart from that, there's a modern history of Israel, and I'm not a modern Middle East expert, but my experiences there have taught
Mhm.
me there's a modern history of Israel that very much informs the culture of the place. It's
Right.
a culture that feels and generally at many times threatened by external powers.
Mhm.
The folks in that land, the Jewish folks in that land, have experienced that the oppression from afar. Their challenges being Palestinian in that land, and so when I look at some of the interpersonal tensions, some of those do cross racial lines and
Mhm.
create challenges. I try to understand it, and one of the things that I understand is the way history informs so much of how people think in the present, maybe in a way that
Yeah.
goes well beyond what I do. So, for
Yeah.
example, I was with a Palestinian bus driver, and we were moving to the Old Testament site of Azekah to teach. And so my mind is on that, but it's a
Mhm.
very narrow road. And we're going there on
Yeah.
Shabbat, and there were a lot of Jewish families up there. And so we've got this big tour bus, and we come nose to nose with a little vehicle, a
Mhm.
Jewish family leaving, and we stop, and the driver reaches over and grabs his water, takes a drink of water, looks over at me, and I'm waiting for, I need to get to the site to teach.
Yeah. Yeah.
This becomes a moment for historical reckoning. He turned to me and said, "Jack, my great grandparents were in the land long before they were." And that's how we were going to settle this traffic dispute of who was going to move and who was going to allow the other person.
Oh,
It had
wow.
to do with what had happened generations earlier. And to walk that land is to understand that the present is the past. And
Yes.
that if you're having trouble understanding a certain dynamic that you're observing socially, it may be because we're not going back enough into their past far enough to understand how what happened a century ago may well be informing how they're choosing to speak or act at the moment. So that's different, right?
Yeah.
That's
That is
different and
different.
creates, you know, I try to observe and I try to learn and understand. My goal is to, as a Bible geographer, is to maintain high access to all places.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a political agenda when I go. I don't take sides in contemporary disputes.
Yeah.
I may have perspectives on them, but I don't. The moment I align myself with a point of view internally within the land, then I am immediately going to be putting myself at odds with somebody else, and I may need their help in getting access to a place or in having a conversation that I'd like my group to hear. So there's that. I'm there to study the past, but I try to work that out around the perimeter of the present.
Yeah. Wow. So I've got a question for you. I saw on your website where you talk about you mentioned a airplane that you and your wife built at some point in time. So are you an active pilot still? Do you guys still have that plane, or what's the story on that?
Yeah. So I actually, I've had a journey, right? And there was one point in my journey that I thought I was going to be a pastor missionary pilot. So I was down the road getting commercial pilot certification, became a flight instructor, chief pilot for a flight school in Milwaukee.
Wow.
And started getting commercial airline, invitations. And at the same time, I was getting invitations to go teach in the university and to be a graduate student. And so I took, it's the second path that I found myself on. But I always loved aviation. Has been a part of my heart. And so about 20 some years ago, 22 years ago, my wife said, well, let's see if we can get you back into it. And, and she said, if you want to build an airplane, I'm going to support your building of the airplane, but I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that lasted only so long as a session where she came along and we were doing some metal work, some riveting, practicing with a technical counselor who was supporting our, maturing into this enterprise. And that led to the building of an airplane. We've been flying it now for 16 years.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
it is, we still have it, still fly it. And love the opportunity that it gives us to travel and backpack. We've been to Yellowstone and Wyoming and all these different places that are part of our backpacking story. And it's just large enough to get our backpacking kits aboard and off we go.
Wow, that's cool.
Heck, we'll have to have you out to Idaho when we get out there. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we love snowshoeing in McCall. We've had a chance to be out there speaking and working in McCall or in the Nampa area, and so we loved the opportunity to snowshoe McCall. We've been out there. I don't think we backpacked out there yet, but anyway, that whole aviation thing, by the way, is very much a part of the fabrication of my thought in the work I do because. There are particularly atmospheric dynamics and meteorology that very much inform how I think about the land. And so understanding climate and understanding weather and atmospherics and, adiabatic lapse rates and all of these sorts of things that go into understanding the air in which I fly very much inform how I think about landscapes as well.
Wow. Interesting.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I like
that. So as we wind down, one quick comment, but if you ever do make it to McCall, where we're moving to in Idaho, Grangeville area is only like an hour and a half away. So if you do make it, hit me up.
Okay.
I'd be glad to meet up with you. But what I want to do before we end this podcast is, of course, we stand with Israel. But I want to get it from like your point of view, a geographer's point of view as to why it's of the utmost importance to stand with, support, however you look at it, the Holy Land of Israel.
Sure. So for me, it's the theology that I have may not fully match your perspective
Yeah, and
on this topic, but I would say the high respect that I have for the Jewish people and for their land uh, clearly informs my work,
mhm,
and being able to have a docent, a caretaker of that land that's
yeah,
welcoming of Christian scholars and Christian groups is absolutely imperative. As I look back over the history of that land, the people who were in charge of that space did not always welcome Christian pilgrims and
right,
Christian students.
mhm,
And so uh, I feel a great sense of respect and a great sense of gratitude for the way in which the modern state of Israel has created the opportunities for me to be in that land, to do their work, to be supportive of the work that I do. Um, that is so important, and I wouldn't want anyone
mhm,
to lose track of the fact that has not always been the case. That
right.
land has been a place that has been welcoming of Christian scholars and
Oh,
Christian students.
Very well put. Very well put.
yeah.
Yeah. So, no, we're getting close to the time here, and so that's I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that and everything. If anybody
Yeah,
wanted to follow you to keep up with what you're doing, how do we stay apprised with what you got going on? We've talked a lot about the stuff that you're getting ready to release, and I too want to follow that as well.
sure. Yeah. So I have a website, johnabeckauthor.com, John A. Beck, John, a middle initial, John A. Beck author.com. It's that website's undergoing reconstruction, so it's a little sketchy right
Okay.
now, but it's still got the
Yeah.
basics, and it's probably the best one-stop shop for the broad range of what I do.
Okay.
Whether it's film production or media work in film, writing, media work, all of those things are shared. I try to keep people up to speed on what's going on there.
Cool. Cool. And then I have to ask you this because what's the easiest way to search it on YouTube if I'm wanting to watch it? Because I've been searching um, Our Daily Bread Holy Land and then just typing in the season number that I want to
Yeah,
search. Is there an easier way to find that?
couple of ways. So in YouTube, the Holy Land, connecting the land and it with its stories is the full title, and so sometimes
Okay.
it's easier to see that if you put the Holy Land and my last name Beck, it'll generally hit pretty well.
Okay.
Our Daily Bread also has a new app, and that app is great because not only does it link to seasons, it
Hmm.
also links to Bible studies that are associated with those programs. So if somebody wants to
Oh,
dig in and
cool.
make this a little bit more part of their engagement,
Yeah.
the Our Daily Bread app will help you get there too.
Awesome.
Cool. How did you how did you get connected with Daily Bread? Have you always worked with them, or is this a? I'm sorry, we could go on and on
Yeah,
with different questions, but how did you get hooked up with Our Daily Bread?
got it. Yeah. So I think it was a marriage that was coming
Ah,
because
okay,
their interest in Holy Land just was out there longer than mine, right?
yeah,
Their viewership, their readership, very closely connected to that. But the actualizing link came when I had been writing a book with another publisher, and the editor of that book moved to Our Daily Bread,
oh,
and
okay,
when he did, and they were going to do a Bible atlas, he said, "Hey, we should do it with Jack." And so he built the bridge. And once I had written for them, I think the first atlas I did with them was back in 2015, 2012, something like that. Um, it was then that the folks wanted to do some on-camera work, and that birthed multiple series that we had done or have done together. So I think that their passion to do Holy Land stuff really networks well with mine, and appreciate the extension that my voice gets by working with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it's very well done. And Marshall, hey, if you, I'm sorry, I was full of questions. Did you have any more questions for Dr. Beck?
No, this has been extremely interesting and intriguing to me. So, man, it has been a pleasure having you on here and getting to know you just a little bit and hearing a little bit of your story. Like I said before, I'm going to go onto YouTube and watch what you've been doing and kind of dig more into what you have going on, because I'm really interested. It's been great.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thanks so much for the chance to visit with you guys. Appreciate you and all you're doing as well.
The pleasure is all ours, and you are welcome back on here anytime. We just thank you. We can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your day to be on our podcast. What an honor it has been. And so, yeah, stick around for just a half a second while I close this out, and then we got to wait for some technical stuff to finish downloading and whatever. So just hang tight real quick. I'll get us closed out here, okay? All right. Hey, guys, thanks for listening to Undaunted Pursuit podcast. We're glad you joined us. This has been a rewarding and just a great conversation with Dr. Beck and what he's doing. Definitely, I want to encourage you all to go onto YouTube and check out his docu-series that's going on right now. It's very well put together. And keep up with us. If you guys want to message us, have any questions for him or anything, you guys can email us at undauntedpursuit@gmail.com, or you could just go to his website too. All the links will be in the show notes below. So, guys, again, thanks for listening. Check us out on social media. And Marshall, sorry, I remembered a bit of everything here, so I'll just close us out so he doesn't have to say all right, we'll see you guys next time. Undaunted Pursuit podcast. See you guys.
Adios.